Today I'm sitting with Mrs. Cynthia Washington Williams, a very close friend. She is a member of the church I attend, the Royal Missionary Baptist Church, and she's also a licensed professional counselor. At this time, I would like for Cynthia to introduce herself to you.
Good evening. As Robert stated, I'm a licensed professional counselor and a national certified counselor. I have a private practice that I've been operating, working with families, and ever since 2001. In addition to my private practice, I travel the world and overseas counseling service members and their families. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Now, Cynthia, we are going to talk about the cycle of domestic violence, noting that South Carolina is ranked #1 in the nation for crimes committed against females, mainly the majority ending up in death, either by an intimate partner or someone that they have had a relationship with.
Yes.
So give us your understanding and your thoughts on the cycle of domestic violence.
I'm glad you asked that, because what happens with the cycle of violence is, I think, initially the behaviors, Robert, that are exhibited are not viewed as indicators, i.e., the person is very nice or begins to tell you that they don't want you to spend time with other people but just with them. And I think that sometimes women begin to feel like, oh, he loves me so much, or he's just jealous and he wants me to spend all the time. So I think what happens when I think about the cycle of violence, there are behaviors that are occurring that are not seen as indicators of domestic violence. And so with the cycle, the first one is tension building. You begin to have little minor incidents of physical and emotional abuse, things that I believe people kind of write off and say, oh, that wasn't nothing major. Then the victim feels some growing tension occurring in the relationship, and then they try to control the situation to avoid any violence, and then they begin to walk on eggshells. They're afraid to do this or afraid to do that, trying to exhibit things that will not, what I call, set the perpetrator off. The victim cannot control the abuser. This is the longest phase. Then there is the explosion, where we actually have either the actual abuse, whether it's physical, sexual, emotional, verbal, or financial. After the explosion and the actual abuse occurs, then what happens is the honeymoon phase. This is when the abuser says that they're sorry and are very apologetic. There might be tears. It might be a very dramatic apology, and they begin to tell you that it'll never happen again. They make promises. There's hearts and flowers. They're idealized and romantic. This phase often disappears with time.
Out of all of the counseling that you've done with those who've experienced domestic violence, and I know we're not asking for names, what is the one common denominator that you always hear from these either victims, survivors, or in the analogy? What is the common denominator?
I think that's an excellent question, and there are a couple. One of them is, it won't happen to me. Another one is, I'm embarrassed. I don't want anyone to know. And I think the denial of it. Someone said to me, I didn't have a black eye, so I wasn't abused. I said, well, did he hit you in your face? She said, yes, but I didn't have a black eye. So the denial, all of those things that fit under the denial, minimizing the abuse, acting as if it did not happen, and we know that denial keeps the cycle going. So all of those things that fall under, I don't want anybody to know, I'm embarrassed, I have this high profile position, I don't want anyone
So, with that being said, what would you suggest would be the very first avenue to take in making an attempt to either eradicate or bring it so low that it's under the radar and it does not happen any longer within a relationship or a family or whatever?
Well, I think that first of all, a lot of times people have grown up in homes where there was domestic violence. And we know that if you grew up in that home, it sends the message that this is how you deal with problems. This is how you deal with conflict. And I want to send the message that domestic violence is not about anger. It's about power and control. It's not about anger. So I think educating, talking about the indicators, having people really just begin to open up and talk about what that experience was so that we can take what I call the cover off and expose domestic violence for what it is and have people not feel so embarrassed to come forth. Even with my level of confidentiality, the first thing that people say is, I don't want anybody to know. I can't even believe I told you. I don't want anyone to know. I'm embarrassed.
Now, what I'm gathering is twofold. It's a learned behavior as well as, it's not even twofold. It's apparent that it can be a learned behavior.
Yes.
If someone grows up in that environment, they think that's the norm.
They believe that that's the norm, and so there isn't any intervention to say, this is not the way you handle a relationship, this is not the way you handle conflict, and it's not about, the person that you're in a relationship with is not a slave. You are not to control that person. And that's why I would like for people to really pay attention, because I hear so many times people try to place it under the auspices of anger. It's not anger we're dealing with. It's power and control. I want control over you. I want to control your thoughts. I want to control your behavior. I want to control what you do and what you don't do.
Now, if I knew someone who's in a situation where domestic violence occurs, what is the worst thing, or what is the worst that I could, or the worst suggestion or recommendation I could give that individual?
When we tell people you need to leave, the research is unequivocally clear that when that person makes it apparent, makes it known that they're leaving that abuser, it's lethal. There's death. I think the worst thing that we can do is just tell somebody what they need to do. I think people need empowerment. People need assistance. People need counseling so that they can create a plan. They know the abuser better than we do, so that they can create the appropriate exit plan. But just telling somebody you need to leave or you're stupid for staying there, I think that that only pushes the victim closer in that situation, because they don't feel like they have someone that they can share their trauma with.
Okay, well, I appreciate your time. Thank you. You've been a great help. And hopefully, when you return, we will have this program underway at the Royal Missionary Baptist Church.
Thank you.